Start off by talking. We're going to discuss chapter 2, which is digestion, and this is a fairly quick chapter in the reference manual, but we're actually going to modify this a little bit. And the first thing we're going to talk about is the human body, and about 55% of the human body is comprised of water. Now, I actually think that's a little bit low. There are studies that indicate that the human body is comprised of about 60 to 70% water, and we'll discuss that a little bit later on. But for for the sake of this discussion, the human body is comprised of about 55% water, um, about 20% protein, about 15% fat, 9% minerals, and about 1% carbohydrates and vitamins. And even though the human body is only comprised of about 1% uh, carbohydrates and vitamins, most diseases are a result of vitamin or mineral deficiencies. If you look at niacin, for example, a deficiency in niacin leads to pellagra, or deficiency in vitamin C would lead to scurry, or a deficiency in vitamin D would lead to rickets. And we talked about this last time, but less than 1% of the population gets all of the micronutrients they need on a daily basis. So what that really means is everybody should be supplementing. Everybody should be taking in um, or looking to take in their vitamins and minerals. Um, so we're going to talk about the digestive system. Everything. So as food enters our mouth, the mechanical phase starts. And obviously, the first phase, the mechanical phase, is chewing, which we're breaking the food down into smaller pieces. Of course, the food mixes with saliva, which acts as digestive enzymes to break the food down even more. Then the food passes into the stomach through the esophagus, and then the churning action in the stomach walls help turn the food into chyme, which is a liquefied mass. And this process is all a result of the gastric acids and the hydrochloric acid in the stomach breaking the food down. The chyme then passes into the small intestine, where it is affected by the secretion from its walls and from the liver and the pancreas. And then the undigested food actually, or the food residue, passes into the large intestine and then into the colon. And I used to talk to some of my clients about this, um, but what I think is interesting is, if you look at John Wayne, for example, when they did an autopsy on John Wayne, he died with about 40 pounds of fecal matter inside of him. And one of the things I'll tell clients at the very beginning is, if you really want to start losing weight, you go through a mild detox where you start eliminating fecal matter, and just by increasing your water intake and uh, eating higher fiber foods can actually help make sure that you stay regular. The next thing we're going to talk about is basically the sophisticated. Your body is a sophisticated food processor, and you've got the mechanical phase, which involves everything from chewing, swallowing, and then of course the muscular activity in the walls of the digestive tract. And then the chemical phase, involves the enzymes that act as catalysts. And they're what the enzymes do is they increase the rate of reaction and aid in the breakdown of large nutrient molecules into smaller molecules. An example of this would be when protein is broken down into amino acids, or when fat is broken down into glycerol and fatty acids, and then when carbohydrates are broken down into sugars. Uh, this is really important, and I hope everybody understands this. But we're talking about digestion, but what we're really talking about is metabolism. A lot of people want to blame blame everything on the metabolism, or lack thereof, and really your metabolism is the activity. It's all the physical and chemical processes that take place within the cells of your body. um, your What happens is, if you can read this in some of the magazines. I like to talk about muscle and fitness. I actually call it muscle and fiction. and there's a reason for that. But they always talk about metabolism. What they're really referring to is your metabolic rate, and that's the rate at which your body burns fuel. Now, your metabolism is set. If you look at this analogy, on the left-hand side, we have a Model T Ford, and on the right-hand side, we have a Formula One race car. The Model T gets about 35, maybe upwards. I think back then it got almost 45 miles per gallon. And that Formula One race car will get anywhere from 3, maybe upwards of 10 miles per gallon. Well, just based on this analogy, you would think that the race car would have a faster metabolism. And really, your metabolism is like miles per gallon. Your metabolism is set. As you get old, of course, it does change a little bit, but not that much. If your body is designed to get 3 to 5 miles per gallon or 3 to 10 miles per gallon, it's going to get 3 to 10 miles per gallon. If it's designed to get 35 to 50 miles per gallon, it's going to get 35 to 55 miles per gallon. So your metabolism doesn't change, but there are ways that you can actually increase your metabolic rate. And some examples are making sure that you're eating high quality foods, increasing the frequency of your meals, and then drinking more water. Just by eating high quality foods, eating more often, and drinking more water, you're going to increase your metabolic rate. Now, I also like to share these examples, but your metabolism is a lot like a wheel, or your metabolic rate is. If you skip breakfast, that wheel doesn't start to spin. But the more often you eat, the faster that wheel starts to spin. And then, if you're not drinking enough water, just imagine shoving food down the garbage disposal and turning it on without turning the water on. When you do that, the food is just going to mesh up. But when you actually turn the water on, it's gonna flush through the pipes. And our bodies work very similarly. So you want to make sure you're drinking lots of water, you're eating every 3 to 4 hours, and you're eating high quality foods. And Renee, are you on now? Renee, are you there? Let's see here. Just got a text from. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
All right. Let me send a text message to Renee real quick. Does anybody have any questions before we move on? Any questions? Okay, it looks like she logged in. All right, sorry about that. We're having some technical difficulties, but we're going to go ahead and move on, and then hopefully Renee will join us. What we're going to do now is talk about fats, and basically, what we want you to understand are there are basically two kinds of fats, and they're really uh, they're really good and bad fats. You have unsaturated fats, and then you have saturated fats. Uh, One of the things for the most part, you should stay away from the saturated fats. Those are what we call the bad fats, and those are going to be higher in cholesterol typically, and they're going to be found from foods that found in foods of animal origin. So your dairy, your fast foods, red meat, fried foods, cooking oils, and so on would be examples of saturated fats. Um, The one thing, uh, of course, everybody knows to stay away from are trans fats. Um, the fats that are the good fats that you should be taking in are your unsaturated fats, and those are fats that are going to be found in avocados, nuts, olive oils, and generally they don't contain any cholesterol. The typical diet should consist of about 15 to 30% fat. It really depends on the individual, and less than 10% of your dietary fat should come from a saturated source. Let's see here.
I want to get 2 books. The books are so
So when fats are broken down, um, they're they're broken down into basically three different categories: either phospholipids, triglycerides, or cholesterol. Phospholipids help with the structural membrane formation. Triglycerides are actually help form fatty acids and glycerol, and then cholesterol is broken into your HDL, LDL, and then VLDL, or your good and your bad cholesterol. One thing, Renee, are you on yet? Looks like she's having a hard time logging on. So as fat is being passed into the small intestine, you have these finger-like projections called uh, villi, which actually help increase the absorption rate of fat primarily. They can actually increase the absorption surface by 600 fold. As carbohydrates pass through the through your digestive system, they're broken down into basically two main categories. The first is complex, and the second is simple. Carbohydrates that are more complex are going to contain fiber, and they absorb less quickly into the bloodstream. Simple carbohydrates generally lack fiber, and they're going to absorb into the bloodstream pretty quickly. Uh, if you so, for example, on this next slide, when you eat a banana, uh, as it passes, that banana will actually pass into your bloodstream pretty quickly. Protein is actually broken down into two subcategories. The first is complete, and the second is incomplete. Anything that came from or had a mother is considered a complete source of protein. For example, chicken or poultry, fish, dairy, eggs are all sources of complete proteins. An incomplete source is a source of protein that doesn't contain all of your essential amino acids. And examples of that would be beans, nuts, and soil. As proteins pass through the digestive tract, they're broken down into your amino acids. And there are basically 24 amino acids, 8 essential. Looks like she can't get in. 8 essential, and then you have your semi-essential and your non-essential amino acids. So unfortunately, it looks like Renee wasn't able to jump on the call, but we were able to wrap that up pretty quick.
I'm muted.
what?
Hey, Michael, Tim here. Um, okay, so when you were talking about your carbs, um, I know there's a benefit of slow absorption on carbs and getting that fiber to process through, but I thought you needed carbs to be absorbed so you could get energy.
Yes. And she had her first like sensory thing. You can like email her parents about it and she can tell you. Mom, she could probably tell.
Yeah, I don't know when you're gonna have time to do that right now.
Tuesdays
Mom, I
and
gotta watch out 0 on
Fridays.
science.
Just like on Saturdays, Sundays.
Okay, y'all have to be quiet.
They have class.
So, hey, Michael, did you hear Tim's question?
Hello, are you there?
Now we can hear you.
Okay. So, Tim, did I answer your question?
I didn't hear anything you said. It was just a lot of silence.
Okay, I apologize about that. So, Tim, carbohydrates are broken down into two subcategories. You have complex and simple. Anything that contains fiber is considered more complex. There's a lot of misconceptions that simple carbohydrates aren't good for you, and that's not true because it's important to take in simple carbohydrates, but you want to make sure that you do that within a certain time frame. For example, after a workout, as you're working out, your body's primarily using carbohydrates as fuel, and you're in a catabolic state, so you're actually breaking down your muscle. And the only way you can get back to an anabolic state is to increase your insulin levels. And the only way you can do that is by increasing your blood sugar by taking in simple carbohydrates. So, right after that workout, you have what's called a metabolic window. And just imagine that you have a cell with like a door on it. And as you finish your workout, that door starts to close. And you have basically between 30 and 45 minutes before that door closes, and the cells can no longer get the nutrients that they need. So, taking in a simple carbohydrate right after a workout would be extremely important to make sure that you can get back to an anabolic response or start building up your muscle. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's very helpful, Michael. So, eating an apple is not the best choice here. Drinking a shake or something, obviously, with some more sugar in it's gonna, well, sugar, protein, and carbs. Um, Sugar is a carb, I guess, right?
Correct. So carbohydrates are broken down into either complex, they're yeah, basically they're sugars.
Okay.
Simplistically speaking, the more sugars, I always use the analogy of sugars holding hands, but the more hands that are being held, the more complex it is.
Got it.
So your sucrose is going to be basically one of the simplest forms of a carbohydrate. But did that answer your question?
Yeah, so a Coke and a Snickers after workout, right? That's
Yeah,
a joke.
exactly. Actually, what's interesting is there's some studies where some bodybuilders would drink a Coke after the workout, and it would increase their insulin levels up to a point to start that anabolic response, which was kind of interesting. There was a
Yeah.
bodybuilder that used to work out at a gym that I worked at, and she would actually chew on a Jolly Rancher during her workout, and her mindset was that she would never actually get into that catabolic response or start breaking down her muscle, which I thought was kind of interesting. But hopefully that answers your question. Who else has a question? Is lack of carbohydrates the reason why I feel so exhausted a couple hours after working out? That is exactly right. So I can't emphasize that point enough. It is so important to make sure you're fueling your body right after the workout. And generally speaking, it should be about a 4 part to 1 part ratio of carbohydrates to protein. And most of the post recovery shakes that you see out on the market are just full of protein. And for one, the human body doesn't metabolize more than 30, maybe upwards of 40 grams of protein uh, per meal, or um, but you should take in about 4 parts carbohydrate to 1 part protein. And they've done a lot of extensive studies on this, and they've compared some of the leading post recovery shakes to chocolate milk, and chocolate milk actually won in every category. And for some reason, chocolate milk has that perfect balance of sugar to protein. And I think a lot of it has to do with the vitamin D and the calcium as well, which actually help with the absorption rate. But great question. So please make sure that you're fueling your body right after the workout. So what about protein? Complete is better or not? So Katie, generally speaking, complete, like I said, protein is broken down into 2 subcategories. You have complete and incomplete. Complete is generally going to be a better source because it's going to contain all of your essential, some of your semi-essential, and then some of your non-essential amino acids. So just think about that principle. Anything that came from or had a mother is generally going to be a better source. Now, of course, right after the workout, that's not always going to be the best case because you want to take in something that contains pre-digested enzymes or that's going to absorb into the bloodstream a little bit quicker. Good question, Katie. Monica,
Well,
I'll go
well,
ahead.
just to follow up with that though is, I mean, if we're supposed to try to form or eat a complete protein, then we also deal with the fact that you know, you have a higher saturation. So confusing.
If you can type the question because I'm having a hard time hearing you. So what would be an ideal, so Monica, I'm going to ask you the question. What would be an ideal snack to eat after your workout? That's a great question. And that usually, like I said, they've compared chocolate milk to some of the leading post-recovery shakes out on the market. If you don't like chocolate milk, what I typically recommend to most of my clients is to drink a shake that contains at least 50% carbohydrates, or drink half that shake before the workout and then half the shake immediately after the workout. Because we didn't talk about what you should do before the workout, but you want to make sure you're supplying your body with your branched chain amino acids and carbohydrates before the workout. And so doing that immediately after the workout is obviously just as important. Did that answer your
So,
question, Monica?
Michael, maybe a follow-up to that. So if we, drank, chocolate milk and, had, the amino powders or the pills that you can get with that for your aminos, would probably be the ideal mix, right? That's what you're saying?
Correct. So anything basically in a powder or pill, basically a powder or pill form is going to be the best because it contains the pre-digested enzymes so it can absorb into your bloodstream faster.
Okay.
So complete is better. So it's hard to understand what is better because complete is better, as you say, but then most of the complete is higher in saturated fat. So, for example, whey protein or whey isolate, which is contained in most of your protein powders, that actually has the highest biological value out of any protein out there, and it doesn't contain saturated fat. The saturated fat has been removed for it. But when you eat, for example, a 3 to 4 ounce piece of chicken, that's going to contain some saturated fat. And generally speaking, it contains about 20 to upwards of 25% fat. Now, it's better to get or consume your protein uh, from from a complete source. But you want to make sure that your saturated fat isn't over 10% of your total fat throughout the day. Does that answer your question, Katie? Great questions. What other questions do you have? Are there any other questions?
Who's going to win the debate?
That's a great question.
You may be right, Katie. You may be right. All right. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for jumping on the webinar tonight. I know you could have been doing a lot of things like watching the debate, but I appreciate you taking the time out of your evenings to jump on. And I apologize for Renee wasn't able to jump on, but we'll make sure that she's able to get on.
Thanks, Michael.
Thank you.